to cspan.org. And now live to coverage of the U.S. Senate. Senators returning from their weekly party meetings this afternoon. They're expected to complete work on extending the Export-Import Bank Charter. Votes on amendments and final passage expected shortly after they gavel back in. Also possible work on extending student loan subsidies. Live now to the Senate floor here on C-SPAN 2.
Senator from Nevada.
I suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Acosta.
Mr. President, ask further proceedings on the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection, so ordered. Senator from North Dakota is recognized.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that following leader remarks on Wednesday, May 16th, the Senate proceed to the consideration of motions to proceed to the following budget resolutions listed below in block. Calendar number 357, Senate Con Resolution 41. Calendar number 354, H-Con Resolution 112. Calendar number 356, Senate Concurrent Resolution 37. Calendar number 384, Senate Concurrent Resolution 42. And calendar number 395, Senate Concurrent Resolution 44. That there be 6 hours of debate on the motions to proceed, equally divided between the two leaders or their designees, that upon the use or yielding back of time, the Senate proceed to vote on the 5 motions to proceed in the order listed above, that there be 2 minutes equally divided between the votes, and that all after the first vote be 10-minute votes, and the motions to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table. Notwithstanding the adoption of any motion to proceed, the Senate proceed to the remaining votes on motions to proceed. Further, that at the conclusion of these votes, the Senate resume consideration of the budget resolution if a motion to proceed is adopted. If no motion to proceed has been adopted, the majority leader be recognized.
Is there objection?
Mr. President, reserving the right to object.
Senator from Nevada.
Thank you, Mr. President. There hasn't been a budget passed here in this Congress and in this House in over 3 years. And I would argue that the exercise we have ending tomorrow will have no substantial differences. I don't think there's anyone in America that believes that we'll have a budget at the end of tomorrow. The Congressional Budget Act of 1974 requires Congress to pass a budget by April 15th. So with that, Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that request of the leader be modified so that S. 1981, the No Budget, No Pay Act, be automatically discharged from the Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee. The bill be immediately placed on the calendar, and that when the Senate proceeds to the budget votes mentioned in the leader's request, the Senate also vote on the motion to proceed to S. 1981 under the same terms and conditions of the other budget votes.
Mr. President.
Does the senator so modify his request?
No, the objection has been heard on our side.
There is objection to the modification. Is there objection to the original request? Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. President, just on the note that the gentleman raised, I want to make clear, I mean, I've heard over and over, no budget resolution is passed in 1,000 days. What is not being said, it is then instead of a budget resolution last year, the Senate and the House passed the Budget Control Act. The Budget Control Act is not a resolution, it's a law. A resolution, as all members know, is purely a congressional document. Never goes to the President for his signature. Last year, instead of a budget resolution, this body and the other body passed legislation called the Budget Control Act that set a budget limits, spending limits for this year and next. Actually, it went even further. It set 10 years of spending caps. A budget resolution usually only sets 1 year of spending caps. So, Mr. President, I want to make clear that instead of a budget resolution being passed last year, the House and the Senate passed the Budget Control Act to set spending limits for this year and next and for the 8 years beyond. In addition, the Budget Control Act established a super committee and gave them special authority to reform the tax system and the entitlement system, and said that if they could come to an agreement, they would not face a filibuster. On a simple majority, we could reform the tax system and the entitlement system here in the United States Senate. And the Budget Control Act further said if the special committee does not agree to reform the tax system, to reform the entitlements. There will be an additional $1.2 trillion of spending cuts put in place over and above the $900 billion of cuts put in place by the Budget Control Act through spending caps for 10 years. That is a total, Mr. President, because the special committee did not agree, of over $2 trillion of spending cuts that are now in law as a result of the Budget Control Act. That is the largest spending cut package in the history of the United States. And it's law. And it's law because of the Budget Control Act passed last year. Now, my colleagues can go and shout it from the rooftops, as they've done, that the Congress hasn't passed a budget resolution in 1,000 days. But they're not telling the whole story. They're not telling people that instead of a resolution, the House and the Senate passed a law. A law is stronger than any resolution. Resolution is purely a congressional document. A law has to be signed by the President of the United States. And the Budget Control Act was passed by the Senate on an overwhelming bipartisan vote, passed by the House, signed by the President of the United States. And it sets the budget limits for this year and next, and it goes beyond that. It says 10 years of spending caps saving $900 billion. And because the special committee could not agree to reforming the tax system and the entitlement system, it put in place another $1.2 trillion of spending cuts that are now in law. And that is a total of over $2 trillion of spending cuts. Mr. President, let me just say, what we don't have is the longer-term plan that the Budget Control Act hoped would come about as a result of the work of the special committee. So that's work we still need to do. But nobody should be under any misimpression or misunderstanding that we don't have spending limits in place for this year and next, and in fact, for all of discretionary spending, spending limits in place for the whole of the next 10 years. That's a fact. Now, tomorrow we're going to have a chance to debate fundamental issues of where the resources of the United States go. But we are in a different situation than we normally would be because the Budget Control Act is in law. We know what the appropriators can spend for this year and next. That's locked in. And we will then have a chance to debate tomorrow longer-term plans. And I'll be interested to see what some of our colleagues say about some of the truly extraordinary and extreme budget plans that are being offered by my colleagues on the other side. Plans to eliminate Medicare in 2 years, plans to cut Social Security benefits by 39%, plans to have trillions of dollars of additional tax cuts for the wealthiest among us, and at the same time cut education 25%, cut funding to reduce our dependence on foreign energy by 60%. Mr. President, plans to cut spending beyond the Budget Control Act limitations by another $2 trillion. Mr. President, we're going to see from some of my colleagues on the other side truly extreme plans. And I hope they will be voted down tomorrow. And I hope that we will be able to make clear to the American people with the Budget Control Act law that passed last year instead of a budget resolution that there are spending caps in place for this year and next and the 8 years beyond. And Mr. President, tomorrow will be an interesting day to discuss different members' views of the future, the fiscal future of this country. And make no mistake, we need to come together on a long-term plan to get us back on track. Mr. President, I was part of the Bowles-Simpson Commission. In fact, it was the idea of Senator Gregg and myself to have such a commission. I voted for the findings of that commission to save more than $4 trillion. And Mr. President, I was part of the group of 6 that spent an entire year trying to find a way to implement Bowles-Simpson. So I am fully prepared to have this debate and this discussion. I am eager for us to come together around a plan to get us back on track, but it's going to require all sides to get out of their fixed positions. Mr. President, that's probably unlikely right before an election, but it needs to happen before the end of this year. I'm very hopeful that Bowles-Simpson, that fiscal commission plan, serves as a good example of where we might find common ground. Both sides, all sides, getting out of their fixed position to reach an agreement to get our country back on track. I thank the Chair and yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Washington.
Mr. President, I ask that the quorum call be dispensed with.
The Senate is not in a quorum call.
Mr. President, I yield back all time.
Without objection. All time is yielded back. Under the previous order, the questions on Amendment 2100. Is there a sufficient second? There appears to be. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka, Mr. Alexander, Ms. Ayat, Mr. Barrasso, Mr. Baucus, Mr. Begich, Mr. Bennett, Mr. Bingaman, Mr. Blumenthal, Mr. Blunt, Mr. Bozeman, Mrs. Boxer, Mr. Brown of Massachusetts, Mr. Brown of Ohio, Mr. Burr, Ms. Cantwell. Mr. Cardin. Mr. Carper, Mr. Casey, Mr. Chambliss, Mr. Coates, Mr. Coburn, Mr. Cochran, Ms. Collins, Mr. Conrad, Mr. Coons, Mr. Corker, Mr. Cornyn, Mr. Crapo, Mr. DeMint, Mr. Durbin, Mr. Enzi, Mrs. Feinstein, Mr. Franken, Mrs. Gillibrand, Mr. Graham, Mr. Grassley, Mrs. Hagan, Mr. Harkin, Mr. Hatch, Mr. Heller, Mr. Hoven, Mrs. Hutchison, Mr. Inhofe, Mr. Inouye, Mr. Isaacson, Mr. Johans, Mr. Johnson of Wisconsin, Mr. Johnson of South Dakota, Mr. Kerry, Mr. Kirk, Ms. Klobuchar, Mr. Cole, Mr. Kyle, Ms. Landrieu, Mr. Lautenberg, Mr. Leahy, Mr. Lee, Mr. Levin, Mr. Lieberman, Mr. Lugar, Mr. Manchin, Mr. McCain, Mrs. McCaskill, Mr. McConnell, Mr. Menendez, Mr. Merkley, Ms. Mikulski, Mr. Moran, Ms. Murkowski, Mrs. Murray, Mr. Nelson of Nebraska, Mr. Nelson of Florida, Mr. Paul, Mr. Portman,
Very exciting.
Mr. Pryor, Mr. Reed of Rhode Island, Mr. Reed of Nevada, Mr. Risch, Mr. Roberts, Mr. Rockefeller, Mr. Rubio, Mr. Sanders, Mr. Schumer,
Prior to the vote, or?
Mr. Sessions, Mr. Shaheen,
Has to run equally. You have divided.
Mr. Shelby,
It doesn't happen as often as people decide to so it's feel more comfortable in the forum.
Ms. Snow, Ms. Stabenow, Mr. Tester, Mr. Thune, Mr. Toomey. Mr. Udall of Colorado. Mr. Udall of New Mexico. Mr. Vitter. Mr. Warner. Mr. Webb. Mr. Whitehouse. Mr. Wicker. Senators voting in the affirmative: Kyle, Lee, and Vitter. Senators voting in the negative: Akaka, Begich, Blumenthal, Brown of Ohio, Cantwell, Carper, Coburn, Collins, Conrad, Durbin, Graham, Hagan, Inouye, Isaacson, Levin, Lugar, Mikulski, Schumer, Udall of New Mexico, and Wyden. Mr. Graham? Mr. Graham? No. Ms. Klobuchar? Ms. Klobuchar? No. Mr. Webb? Mr. Webb? No. Mr. Bingaman? Mr. Bingaman? No. Mr. Brown? Mr. Brown of Massachusetts? No. Mr. Rubio? Mr. Rubio? Aye. Mr. Inhofe? Mr. Inhofe? No. Mr. Cornyn? Mr. Cornyn? Aye. Mr. Tester? Mr. Tester? No. Mr. Whitehouse? Mr. Whitehouse? No. Mr. Casey? Mr. Casey? No. Mr. Leahy? Mr. Leahy? No. Mr. Harkin? Mr. Harkin? No. Mr. Chambliss? Mr. Chambliss? No. Mr. Nelson? Mr. Nelson of Nebraska? No. Mr. DeMint? Mr. DeMint? Aye. Mr. Coons? Mr. Coons? No. Mr. Paul? Mr. Paul? Aye. Mrs. Murray? Mrs. Murray? No. Mr. Blunt? Mr. Blunt? No. Mr. Bozeman? Mr. Bozeman? No. Mrs. Shaheen? Mrs. Shaheen? No. Mr. Cochran? Mr. Cochran? No. Mr. Johans? Mr. Johans? No. Mr. Reed? Mr. Reed of Rhode Island? No. Mrs. Boxer? Mrs. Boxer? No. Mr. Warner? Mr. Warner? No. Mr. Moran? Mr. Moran? No. Mr. Franken? Mr. Franken? No. Mr. Alexander? Mr. Alexander? No. Ms. Ayotte? Ms. Ayotte? No. Mr. Sanders? Mr. Sanders? No. Ms. Snow? Ms. Snow? No. Mr. Burr? Mr. Burr? No. Mr. Roberts? Mr. Roberts? No. Mr. Hoven? Mr. Hoven? No. Mr. Johnson? Mr. Johnson of South Dakota? No. Mrs. McCaskill? Mrs. McCaskill? No. Mr. Enzi? Mr. Enzi? No. Mr. Heller? Mr. Heller? No. Mr. Sessions? Mr. Sessions? No. Mr. Wicker? Mr. Wicker? No. Mr. Risch? Mr. Risch? Aye. Mr. Menendez? Mr. Menendez? No. Mr. Manchin? Mr. Manchin? No. Mr. Crapo? Mr. Crapo? Aye. Mr. Nelson? Mr. Nelson of Florida? No. Mr. Lieberman? Mr. Lieberman? No. Mr. Hatch? Mr. Hatch? Aye. Mr. Udall? Mr. Udall of Colorado? No. Mr. Portman? Mr. Portman? No. Mr. Toomey? Mr. Toomey? No. Mr. Coates? Mr. Coates? No. Mr. Cardin? Mr. Cardin? No. Mr. Cole? Mr. Cole? No. Stabenow? Ms. Stabenow? No. Mr. Lautenberg? Mr. Lautenberg? Mr. Lautenberg? No. Mr. Johnson? Mr. Johnson of Wisconsin? No. Mr. Grassley? Mr. Grassley? Aye. Ms. Landrieu? Ms. Landrieu? No. Mr. Kerry? Mr. Kerry? No. Mr. McCain? Mr. McCain?
No.
Aye. Mr. Bennett? Mr. Bennett? No. Mrs. Hutchison? Mrs. Hutchison? No. Mr. Barrasso? Mr. Barrasso? No. Mr. Corker? Mr. Corker? No. Mr. Merkley? Mr. Merkley? No. Ms. Murkowski? Ms. Murkowski? No. Mr. Pryor? Mr. Pryor? No. Mrs. Feinstein, Mrs. Feinstein? No. Mr. Baucus? Mr. Baucus? No. Mr. Thune? Mr. Thune? No. Mrs. Gillibrand? Mrs. Gillibrand? No. Mr. McConnell? Mr. McConnell? No. Mr. Shelby? Mr. Shelby? No. Mr. Reed of Nevada? No.
Are there any senators wishing to change their votes or to vote? Hearing none. On this vote, the yeas are 12 and the nays are 87 under the previous order, requiring 60 votes for the adoption of this amendment. The amendment is not agreed to. Under the previous order, there will be 2 minutes of debate, equally divided prior to a vote, in relation to Amendment Number 2101, to be offered by the Senator from Kentucky, Mr. Paul. The Senator from Kentucky, and please, let's have order.
I'd like to call up Amendment 2101.
Clerk will report.
Senator from Kentucky, Mr. Paul, proposes an amendment number 2101. At the appropriate place, insert the
I'd
following.
like to ask consent that the amendment be considered as read.
Without objection.
First,
Please order so that the gentleman may be heard.
first we borrow billions of dollars from China, India, Saudi Arabia, and then we loan it back to them again. Republicans rightly complain that we're sending taxpayer money to the president's major donors at Solyndra and BrightSource. Now Republicans need to be consistent and say we're not going to send Ex-Im loans to even bigger companies who are even more profitable. If it is wrong for the government to choose winners and send your money to corporations, we should say it's wrong and we should vote against this. Anybody remember the president threatening to increase taxes on corporate jets? Ex-import banks now going to increase the loans for corporate jets tenfold. My amendment will stop this charade. My amendment will stop sending taxpayer dollars overseas to countries who we already are borrowing money from. It makes no sense, and the time is now to stop it.
Senator's time has expired.
Mr. President.
The Senator from Washington.
Mr. President, this amendment is simply another attempt to gut the export-import bank financing that U.S. manufacturers use to increase the sales of their products around the globe. The amendment would prohibit U.S. exporters from using the financing to any country that owns U.S. debt. So basically we're saying we're going to prohibit U.S. manufacturers who make good products from helping to sell those products in places like China and others just because of their amount of U.S. debt. This is about job creation in America for a program that actually generates money to our Treasury and helps us pay down the deficit. We should be helping all U.S. manufacturers sell all around the globe and create jobs here at home. I urge my colleagues to oppose the Paul amendment.
Mr. President, I ask for the yeas and
The Senator's... okay. Is there a sufficient second? There appears to be. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Sorry.
No, good.
Carry it out.
Mr. Alexander. Ms. Ayotte. Mr. Barrasso. Mr. Baucus. Mr. Begich. Mr. Bennett. Mr. Bingaman. Mr. Blumenthal. Mr. Blunt. Rubio. Mr. Bozeman. Mrs. Boxer. Mr. Brown of Massachusetts. Mr. Brown of Ohio. Mr. Burr. Ms. Cantwell. Mr. Cardin. Mr. Carper. Mr. Casey. Mr. Chambliss. Mr. Coates, Mr. Coburn, Mr. Cochran, Ms. Collins. Sure. Mr. Conrad, Mr. Coons, Mr. Corker, Mr. Cornyn, Mr. Crapo, Mr. Dement, Mr. Durbin, Mr. Enzi, Mrs. Feinstein, Mr. Franken,
Tough one, but no.
Mrs. Gillibrand, Mr. Graham, Mr. Grassley, Mrs. Hagan, Mr. Harkin, Mr. Hatch, Mr. Heller, Mr. Hoven, I got you. Mrs. Hutchison, Mr. Inhofe, Mr. Inoue, Mr. Isaacson, Mr. Johans, Mr. Johnson of Wisconsin, Mr. Johnson of South Dakota, Mr. Kerry, Mr. Kirk, Ms. Klobuchar, Mr. Cole, Mr. Kyle, Ms. Landrieu, Mr. Lautenberg, Mr. Leahy, Mr. Lee, Mr. Levin, Mr. Lieberman, Mr. Lugar, Mr. Manchin, Mr. McCain, Mrs. McCaskill, Mr. McConnell, Mr. Menendez, Mr. Merkley, Ms. Mikulski, Mr. Moran, Ms. Murkowski, Mrs. Murray, Mr. Nelson of Nebraska, Mr. Nelson of Florida, Mr. Paul, Mr. Portman, Mr. Pryor, Mr. Reed of Rhode Island, Mr. Reed of Nevada, Mr. Risch, Mr. Roberts, Mr. Rockefeller, Mr. Rubio, Mr. Sanders, Mr. Schumer, Mr. Sessions, Mrs. Shaheen, Mr. Shelby, Ms. Snow, Ms. Stabenow,
I don't even know what this one does, so I wasn't really...
Mr. Tester, Mr. Thune, Mr. Toomey, Mr. Udall of Colorado, Mr. Udall of New Mexico, Mr. Vitter, Mr. Warner, Mr. Webb, Mr. Whitehouse, Mr. Wicker. Mr. Wyden. Senators voting in the affirmative: Dement, Hatch, Lee, Paul, and Rubio. Senators voting in the negative: Akaka, Barrasso, Begich, Bennett, Bingaman, Blumenthal, Brown of Massachusetts, Brown of Ohio, Burr, Cantwell, Cardin, Chambliss, Collins, Conrad, Corker, Enzi, Feinstein, Franken, Gillibrand, Graham, Grassley, Hagan, Harkin, Heller, Isaacson, Johnson of South Dakota, Kerry, Klobuchar, Cole, Lautenberg, Levin, Lieberman, Lugar, Manchin, McCaskill, Menendez, Merkley, Mikulski, Murkowski, Murray, Nelson of Nebraska, Nelson of Florida, Pryor, Reed of Rhode Island, Roberts, Sanders, Schumer, Sessions, Shaheen, Shelby, Tester, Toomey, Udall of Colorado, Warner, Webb, Whitehouse, Wicker, and Wyden. Mr. McCain. Mr. McCain, no. Mr. Leahy, no. Mr. Bozeman. Mr. Bozeman, no. Ms. Stabenow. Ms. Stabenow, no. Mr. Cochran. Mr. Cochran, no. Mr. Hoven. Mr. Hoven, no. Mr. Risch. Mr. Risch, aye. Mr. Udall. Mr. Udall of New Mexico, no. Mr. Casey. Mr. Casey, no. Mr. Inhofe. Mr. Inhofe, no. Mr. Crapo. Mr. Crapo, no. Mr. Coburn. Mr. Coburn, aye. Mr. Portman. Mr. Portman, no. Mr. Moran. Mr. Moran, aye. Mr. Baucus. Mr. Baucus, no. Mrs. Boxer. Mrs. Boxer, no. Mr. Blunt, no. Mr. Cornyn. Mr. Cornyn, no. Mr. Kyle. Mr. Kyle, no. Mr. Johnson of Wisconsin, no. Mr. Johans. Mr. Johans, no. Ms. Snow. Ms. Snow, no. Mr. Reed. Mr. Reed of Nevada, no. Mr. Inouye. Mr. Inouye, no. Mr. Alexander. Mr. Alexander, no. Mr. Thune. Mr. Thune, no. Ms. Landrieu. Ms. Landrieu, no. Coons. Mr. Coons? No. Mr. Carper? No. Mr. McConnell? Mr. McConnell? No. Mr. Coates? No. Mrs. Hutchison? Mrs. Hutchison? No. Ms. Ayotte? Ms. Ayotte? No. Mr. Durbin? No. Mr. Vitter. Mr. Vitter, aye.
Are there any senators wishing to vote or to change their vote? Hearing none, on this vote the yeas are 9, the nays are 89. Under the previous order requiring 60 votes for the adoption of this amendment, the amendment is not agreed to. Under the previous order, there will be 2 minutes of debate equally divided prior to a vote in relation to amendment number 2102 offered by the senator from Tennessee, Mr. Corker.
Thank you, Mr. President. This amendment, the most important thing this amendment does is